Welcome back. In this module, we're going to talk further about navigation design and look at specific navigation considerations. Let's start with navigation labeling. As with many aspects of UX, copywriting is important. In fact, copywriting sometimes becomes 50% of your job as a UX designer. To that end, navigation items should be labeled clearly and obviously. If a human can't understand the label, then it's not right. Users shouldn't be required to parse a label to comprehend it. They shouldn't be needing to think, is what that means. If a user can't more or less anticipate the contents of a particular category, then it isn't a good experience. When users navigate, they do focus on labels. But how do designers create effective navigation labels? Here are some pieces of advice. Firstly, focus on task. What are the 3 to 5 tasks most users will be trying to accomplish? Make sure you structure your navigation around those tasks. And also think about the types of labels they're looking for. What are the keywords they're thinking about in their mental state? Secondly, keep it simple. Aim for 4 to 5 top-level buckets and no more than 7 generally. Information overload can be a detriment to navigation. If you can't give users a concise way of choosing, then it will be absolutely difficult for them to make a choice. Thirdly, when it comes to navigation labeling, be consistent. Don't use different ways of spelling a word. And also try to observe similar label lengths. If one of your global navigation labels has 3 words, don't make every other one 2 words or 1 word. Come up with some consistency. UX isn't just consistency in colors or typography styles. It's consistency in copy and content as well. And the more that you can keep your labels consistent, the easier it will be for users to repeat a process. When approaching navigation labeling, it's also important to reduce ambiguity. Avoid category labels that don't really insinuate anything, like more or miscellaneous. That's never a good practice. You should go back to the drawing board if you end up with more or miscellaneous on your list of elements. Positioning matters. Users typically recall the first and last item in a series, which is called the serial position effect. That really changes the tide of your navigation. Also, group like items together and think about the order when creating navigation. Users progress through your experience in a specific way or have the expectation of doing that. Your navigation should absolutely be positioned in that same way. Envision the mental model of your user, and it will help you with the positioning of your navigation elements. And when thinking about navigation labeling, communicate. Use labels which suggest what the company does or what that link is going to send you to. If it's in research, use research as a label versus work. Be specific. The industry can dictate some language that maybe you didn't even think about. Make sure that you educate yourself in the area of expertise that your client is in. While the site does look great and has some easy to access navigation elements, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the navigation here. What do you think of the navigation structures? Do they complement what users' expectations might be if they land on the University of Oxford's website? Do the labels that are present here give you a clear indication of what's behind them? I'd like you to visit the University of Oxford's website and take a look from a critical standpoint at these navigation labels and give me a breakdown of which ones don't hit the mark as an exercise following this module. When approaching navigation, we really need to think about responsive web design practices. Mobile and desktop specifically are at the most extreme and will need completely different ways of navigating your experience. A desktop website will have much more viewport size to be able to share the navigation structures and hierarchy, whereas a mobile experience will have a limited amount of screen real estate. Mobile screens are obviously smaller than desktop screens, but they're also usually oriented differently. And when we think about creating our navigation structures, we need to take into account that the structure itself will likely pivot from horizontal to vertical. We need to think about word length. We need to think about the amount of labels, the categories themselves, the depth and the breadth. Assembling those together takes a little bit of extra work, but if we can concentrate on creating a navigation structure that meets those two platforms, we should be able to cover everything in between. Mobile websites typically work better with vertical navigation versus horizontal. Taking advantage of the portrait-sized screen of a mobile device means that vertical is ideal. Mobile users thankfully tend to scroll down on a website and will be less likely to miss a navigation element. And the convention of mobile experience navigation is that 90% of mobile websites use vertical navigation already. Here's an example of navigation, desktop versus mobile. The Home Depot site has a number of navigation elements in the header alone. And it uses iconography to provide some context to some of those top-level categories, as you can see. Also prominently featured in the area around navigation is search. And for a company that has 160,000 products, search is likely used quite often. Comparing navigation structures to mobile, there is a drastic change. Home Depot's mobile navigation compresses a number of those elements. It still features icons to represent some of the key elements of the courtesy nav, but it moves all other elements under that hamburger icon, which is the 3 lines on the far left of the screen. From within that element of navigation, you can access all of the other elements of the global nav. This website also relies on a fairly robust footer navigation. This mobile header is likely redesigned to cater to specific user intent when on mobile devices. When a navigation structure is as complicated as Home Depot, reproducing it on a mobile device can be quite taxing, and users may not have the patience to spend the time digging down into the hierarchy, which is why about 50% of this viewport, which is why the search is so prominent and spans about 80% of the screen width. Websites with such a large SKU count tend to have a fairly robust search. Where we saw the hamburger nav housing product categories on the desktop version, on the mobile site, it includes not only the shop by department category, but shop by room, weekly flyer, and so on. So all of those elements of global nav now sit beneath the hamburger navigation. And from within there, users can tap to expand across instead of down. I'm going to leave you with another exercise from this module. I'd like you to take a desktop navigation and convert it to mobile. Using any drawing software, create a simple wireframe of the mobile header, as well as the inside of the off-canvas menu. Here's the example we're going to use for this exercise. All you have to do is take these elements and create a simple sketch of how it would be repositioned in a vertical viewport. And that concludes our module on navigation design considerations. We'll see you in the next one.